Solutions Consultant with Beyond 20. Today I'm going to show you how to modify an object such as incident to allow for gathering of data from a non-logged in user utilizing Cherwell Webforms. Now you may have seen videos in the past dealing with surveys and other features, but in this case we had a client who wanted to be able to allow a non-current customer to go to their not logged in portal and allow that customer to request a customer account be created for them. Now obviously you could do this through a mail link or other ways, but I decided to go about this with a web form process, and I used incident, and there are a whole lot of moving pieces, but I figured this might be something useful that you may find a need for in your world. So there are a lot of moving parts, so let's get right into it. I do not have a label or button on my not logged in portal to kick this off because I was just developing this real quickly to do the demonstration. So here in my notepad I've got the URL that we're going to use, and I'll explain this shortly. So there are a couple things that I needed to do to make this work. First, I came into security, users, and I created a user for this purpose. So I created a user and named it Webforms, full name Web space Forms, and gave it a password. Now you'll want to make sure that you do something similar to this, but make sure that your user and password is fairly secure and that their rights are limited. For the demo, I went ahead and added that user to the IT Service Desk Level 1 security group. As you can see here, we have Webforms as a member of this. Reason I did this is so that they would have rights to submit an incident. The other thing that I did was I came into the CSM client and I created a customer named Webforms so that they would have rights to the portal, etc. Not that they needed them, but primarily so that that user would be able to come in and be listed as the customer on my record here. So, but anyway, I wanted Webforms to be the customer for the incident that I'm creating. And then lastly, for Webforms, in our Program Files x86, Cherwell Browser Applications, Cherwell Webforms folder, we had to come into the web config file. I'm going to edit with Notepad++, and I had to set that user as the Webforms user. So I went ahead and just gave the login name Webforms and gave it a password and enter those two values in. Also, out of the box, whenever you use a Webforms, it redirects you to cherwellsoftware.com. So I put the redirection back to my local portal. So whenever we're done submitting an incident, we'll come back here. So that's getting the security set up to use the Webforms, having a user with authorization to use Webforms. I believe we have other videos out there showing how to do this with supporting objects. But in this case, I didn't want to build the supporting object and the extra automation processes needed, because ultimately the client wanted to be able to come into this incident, see all the information about the newly requested customer or account, and then run a one-step after they've reviewed it to in turn create a customer record. So I'm not doing the one-step piece, fairly simple. These three fields are available in the incident, and you'll see that in a few minutes. So we've updated our web config file, we've created our Cherwell user web forms, and we've created our Cherwell customer web forms. Obviously, we could use the default customer or any other customer in the system. So that's really all we had to do with the web forms portion. So now, what else did I have to do? Well, in this case, since I want to use an incident, what I did was I came to the incident form, and I don't want to expose the entire incident form to an anonymous user. So what I did was I created my own form. So come in here, edit form, and I created a web forms form. I'm being real consistent with that use of web forms. Obviously, you would want to change those names around somewhat. Use something more descriptive, more meaningful. But to do this, if you don't know how, all you do is come up to form and hit new form and give it a name and drag the fields and whatever else that you want onto it. So now I have an incident form called web forms that we can reference. I also added these 3 fields, created a folder called web forms, and added my 3 new fields in there because we wanted to grab their email, their name, and their phone. Obviously, whatever field you want them to fill out, you can have that there for their submission. Then, one other thing that I had to do, incidents have required unsaved fields. One of those being description. So, for all of the required for save fields, I won't walk through all of them. We came in here and on their properties, I set a default value. I mean, you could get away with removing the required for save, but that's not really good. You do have fields that you want to be required for save. So what I did instead was say, I'm going to have a default value in certain cases. So we're using an expression. It is a custom expression that itself has a custom expression, which is a case statement. And that case statement says, if the current user display name equals web forms, my user, then I'm going to make the description be submitted via web forms. So basically, we created the user, we created the customer, and within the web config file, we set the user as web forms. So now we know who's going to be submitting those incidents from the anonymous portal. And so we set that up as a conditional on, or a default value, so that if the user is our web forms user, then we know that we want the description to be whatever we wanted it to be. And that's how we're able to get around the required for save fields, even though all of incident isn't available to be seen. So incident priority, or incident description, incident priority, customer display name, same thing. Default value is web forms if the current user is web forms, that type of thing. A third thing that I did on incident, on our edit actions, we want to be able to give the client the ability to see what value that new account request came in as. So what I did was I put a condition on this save action 1 step that says only if the current user display name equals web forms, and we're only going to execute on the first save, and we're going to update the description field. And all that is on the update description, I'm grabbing the current field that I set. So I said it's submitted via web forms, because in this case it's going to be new, for my client it's actually a new account request. So I want that to show up as new account request, which is what we auto-filled by default. But then I simply added the 3 extra fields that I had on incident. So we'll go ahead and keep description highlighted here. But then, if you remember, I set up a folder and I have 3 fields that we're gathering from the web form. And so my new description upon saving the record is going to be submitted via web forms, but then we're going to show to the technician or user the name that they put into the name field, the email they put in the email field, and the phone number that they put into the phone field. So this save action will actually update our incident record. Now, all of that, and you can go back through the video and, capture pieces of this. All of that leads to the ability to enter this URL, and basically we're saying go to my server, the Cherwell Webforms, and run the command create using the Webforms form on the business object incident. If you remember, my Webforms form only had 3 fields on it. So let's go see what this looks like. If we open our web browser, we paste our URL in, and again, you can create a link on your not logged in dashboard. That's going to bring you over to the web form. And now that our web form is loaded, we see our incident form with 3 fields that we had identified. And there's also the ability to add additional information and or add an attachment. So if we come in here and we're going to put the name as demo, the email will be demo@demo.com, and the phone number will be 22222-3333. I'm not going to put any additional details or anything like that. I'm going to submit my incident, and now we're going to go back to our local host landing page. If you remember, I said make sure in the web config to change those 4 URLs to be your server Cherwell portal IT rather than the cherwellsoftware.com. If you don't, then what's going to happen is once you submit, your web page is going to redirect you to Cherwell's home site. All right, so we just submitted a new incident. This was a previous example. So let's go into our searching. We'll just search for open incidents. We're going to sort by created date and time. This video is being recorded at 12:25 on 11/18. So this is the new incident we created. Also, we've got our user is demo, or the name that they provided was demo with demo@demo.com with the phone number 22 with 3s. Now, obviously you can go through the system analyzer and go to the folder and see that those 3 fields have those values. To validate that our description did properly update, so that the technician can just look in the description to see what the value of those 3 fields are. Also, it kept my original description submitted via Webforms, which was the default value I put in the description, and our customer was Webforms. So as we look through our incidents, if we have a very specific case where we're using these Webforms for something, we can find all those customers, do a search on just those customers, and take action. So anyhow, I thought it was kind of neat to use the subform off of incident to do this rather than creating a child object where you would have to put supporting automation processes in place to actually create an incident. I obviously could also, in this case, it would make sense that on my incident fields, when submitted via the web forms, that I would also set a default value for incident type to be request rather than incident, and change my phone source, add my impact and urgencies for priority 3 so that those aren't just blank. Set my service category, subcategory. Again, just using that conditional for a default value that if the customer is whoever you identified as your web forms user, if the current user display name is that, then give these values in your default values. Anyhow, I hope this has been useful. I'm going to bring up the URL again. I double click, sorry. Again, it is the address of your server, so this could be an HTTPS if you're on SaaS. Your server name, Cherwell Webforms, and then the command equals create, and our form that we're using is the Webforms form on the business object incident. And this is how the URL or the link that you would use to initiate the transaction. As always, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce these videos every week to try to share information and make things easier for those of you out there. We also monitor for any questions, and if you do have a question, submit it. We'll either respond in email or we'll create a video with an answer to your question. Have a great day.